Welcome to ReReview, where we watch movies from our past with a perspective from today. Your hosts are Matt, Bobby, and Austin, and we love the films from our youth, so we're taking a look back to see if they still hold up. On this episode, we're discussing Robocop. It was released in 1987, directed by Paul Verhoeven. It stars Peter Weller, Nancy Allen, and Don O'Harley. This movie is about near-future dystopic Detroit society, robot police. There's a lot going on. Now, this is a fair warning. We're spoiling a 37-year-old movie, so if you haven't seen it, we will be revealing key plot points. You know, this movie opens up with, and I think, Matt, you made this comment, a bit of booty sweat, where I think it tries to present us with the alternative world that we're, this near future society that we're watching, where pretty much everything is going wrong in 3-minute segments. And they do that in recurring elements throughout the entire movie. I know they wanted us to feel a certain way about the world that they were in to kind of reinforce that things were not good. But like some of those stories were so janky. I don't know.
Well, I mean, with Verhoeven, I mean, obviously with Starship Troopers also being a movie that he directed, he likes to use commercials to, I guess, indirectly tell you about the world that you're in and how kind of, because he has a very unique way of looking at the world, clearly. And I think the way he does these commercials definitely helps sells how, on a more positive, zany, and on another end, how really messed up the world is. Using these, because like they like you said, there's a range of what you get. Like, what was the one where it was like a heart commercial or whatever?
Yep.
And then it does kind of jump around. Obviously, you have the reoccurring sketch with I can't remember his name, the mustachio glasses to do the I'd buy that for $1 guy.
Oh yes.
You get that as a reoccurring thing, but it just kind of shows, like, I guess, how out of touch this world is.
I mean, how do we feel that it seemed like it was actual news footage of like dead people and people getting murdered and actual tragedy?
Like, how did we feel about that?
Yes.
I mean, one, they didn't really get that too deep into it, but I do think that that's kind of like the poor man's way of getting that kind of footage without actually having to film it. I mean, it's the stock footage of these kind of movies, because like I think of like a movie like World War Z. They did that at the beginning of theirs too, where they used riot scenes and stuff like that in order to kind of show, violence and stuff without actually having to get into it. Because I mean, it's cost savings, but at the end of the day, those things are real. So I guess it kind of like it's real, but it's not so noticeable that you can say, okay, well, I know that's Tiananmen Square, or that's the Berlin Wall coming down. Like, it's not so recognizable that you can pin it to one thing. And as we know with human history, it repeats itself when it comes to violence, war, and crime and everything. So you can probably use that stock footage for the rest of humanity and it would still be relevant. So
and now that we've gone full existential on the human how humans work, you're right, because I think I pointed out the one that I enjoyed was they were talking about the president visiting the Star Wars space station and it like losing something, so they show people floating, but it was just a cylinder, which is the people who do the plane flight that allows you to get a zero gravity feeling.
What do they call it? The vomit comet or whatever, where it goes up and down.
Do you think people don't know that Ronald Reagan called the satellite defense system Star Wars?
No, at this time it would have been very well known at that time. I think that's just why I think they probably leaned into that. I don't feel like they probably did it justice in the sense of how ludicrous it was even back then. I think that they actually kind of, because I mean, wasn't it later on the Star Wars laser like scorched Santa Barbara or whatever?
Yes.
So like I mean, it was a total nonsense scam back then, but I don't think they really were fully aware of it at the time. I think they believed the propaganda that was kind of spun into it, and they put it into this movie as a result.
Yeah, I just heard the term Star Wars and I was like, oh yeah, that was the whole thing where they did that, and that's what it was actually called.
If only. Then we call it something else now. Death-defying, earth-destroying machines.
The Death Star.
Yeah, that's what it should be, right? If they're doing right by anyone, it should be called the Death Star. We get introduced to some uppity-uppers who are all called the executives, right? And I think we get the thing that we really wanted. We get some stop motion because we get to see it was Ed 209.
Yes. The beastly Ed 209.
I was very excited by the stop motion. I actually thought it looked really, really good.
Yeah, I thought so too.
It looked pretty nice. I think that you always have the issue with stop motion of like the lack of blur.
Yeah.
That's always been a problem with stop motion, but I think they did a good enough job in compositing it with everything.
Yeah, it looked like there was motion blur.
Like a little bit, but I don't think that there was probably enough to actually. So I think that it was big enough and slow enough that, like, it's not like in Jurassic Park when they were originally going to do it in stop motion, like with like a raptor. You can't really sell motion blur with a raptor with, stop motion. Like it would have been impossible. But this thing moves machine-like in the first place, so I think you can kind of get away with the limitations compared to like doing like King Kong, right? It's a living thing.
Are you sure that it is machine-like? Because if I know anything about this entire movie and the Ed 209, I feel like there's a tiger and there's a pig and there's a lion and there's a lot of different creatures inhabiting this machine.
Oh yeah, for sure. The thing definitely roared. Yeah. I liked how it kind of like threw like a toddler temper tantrum kind of when it was like laying on its back in the stairwell. I was like, give me up, give me up.
There's, we'll talk about a very important design element later, but how did we feel about the design of the Ed 209?
I always liked the Ed 209. Like, I mean, I have a figure of it sitting in my room or whatever. So like, I've always liked the concept of it. I think that if there ever were going to be robots out there or whatever, I imagine that's probably what it would look like. Like to me, it's kind of always like my dream to see like mech based movies. And like that looks like something I could see like a dude popping out of or something, like a pilot.
Right.
I do think that if you were going to put them on a comparison, Ed 209 is definitely a much more menacing design compared to Robocop. If I'm in an alley and Robocop shows up versus Ed 209, I'm probably soiling myself when I see Ed 209.
Oh, for sure. No, like when Robocop shows up, you're like, oh, neat. What's this? When Ed 209 shows up, it's like, there's something that looks like trouble.
It's a bit of big trouble. Now, essentially the CCP, right, is the police unit for Detroit.
OCP, yeah.
But they're OCP, sorry, I'm just confused.
The logo makes it look like CCP though.
Yeah, that's what I was like. I was thinking of the logo for sure.
I was like, that logo is weird. It doesn't work.
But in this instance, in our real life, we have private companies making scary death robots that will eventually sell to the police. But here, this is the police making the scary death robots and being their own Boston Dynamics, right?
Yeah. The one thing that I do think that obviously not in a vacuum, there has been a remake of this movie made 10 years ago now in 2014. And I do think that movie did delve deeper into, because if you removed RoboCop and Ed 209, nothing of this world sells the fact that they should have robots like these. There's nothing in this world that says, yeah, we saw a space station and a death laser or whatever, but nothing says we should have advanced robotics like these at all. And then all of a sudden you have these two, whereas the newer one, I think they kind of transitioned you a little bit better, that they would have like, they actually have like drones, and they have, what we're kind of seeing now with some of the designs from like Tesla and whatnot, with a bunch of the privatized robots or whatever. These just kind of, bro, there goes, robots that can, do amazing things. We're like, I'm a huge fan of what Boston Dynamic has done, as terrifying as it is. Seeing the evolution of a hopping robot to a backflipping, machine, like you get to see the evolution here. It just kind of pops out of nowhere.
And they try to like kick over the Boston Dynamics robot to try to like work on its like stabilization. It's like that's how they fight back.
This is how the revolution begins.
Stop doing that.
So if you work in software, things don't always go according to plan. In this executive room, they decided to have loaded Ed 209 and loaded weapons, and then we get, which I think, you can tell me.
That sounds reasonable.
No, why not is a good response. But I think one of the things that I found surprising, or at least there was a bit of the shock value, and maybe this is why Starship Troopers is that way too. It was gory just from that get-go jump. Anytime you're dealing with the they did a lot of blood packs, is all I gotta say. It was like nonstop bursting of blood everywhere.
Yeah, there was a lot, because there was that first burst of a bunch, and then there was like a couple second delay, and then they did it a bunch again. And I was like, man.
I was borderline surprised that Ed 209 didn't just launch a rocket at the dude too.
Yes. He probably should have. At least the way he's set up, it seems like he should be launching tons of rockets. Yeah, I didn't expect the goriness, and I know that carries throughout the rest of the film. I think there's definitely an element of our favorite thing that I'm going to say here. I think I saw this on USA. So there's some stuff that I was just like, wait, I just do not remember it being this way. So we get introduced to Murphy. We understand he's like a good cop, right? He's got a family. He hangs out with I'm forgetting her name.
Oh, Lewis.
Yeah. And for some reason they're going after the bad guys. They get into a shotgun fight. We can have all the talks about why the weapons that these people are using, but whatever.
One thing I didn't notice. So I've seen this movie quite a few times. I think the first time I watched this was on VHS, like way back in the day. This was the first time I think I realized that Murphy was sent to that police precinct specifically to die. They sent a qualified cop to a terrible area because what's his name? The executive dude or whatever mentions we've placed police in key locations for this program. It was specifically to put him in a situation where he probably would die, because once he died, they could use him for whatever they wanted.
Oh, because he signed a waiver.
There's a weird situation in the very beginning where the commissioner dude, like, or the sergeant or whoever it is, like calls him out specifically, like in their lineup, and he says like, Murphy front and center. Like, what was that? Was that part of that? Or because I didn't really realize that he was kind of like supposed to die. I mean, that kind of seems like a little bit of a wild card because there was Lewis there too.
Well, I mean, at that point, according to the story, basically every cop was dying. So literally like 5 cops had died, leading up to that. And then.
But prior to, now you got me asking questions here, but prior to, it was supposed to be Ed, but then it's this 90-day program. You're saying there were other cops that were eligible to be turned into Robocop.
Most likely. I think it was probably a case of who died first, probably. I think they probably, because he came from, we'll call it the Newport Beach of Detroit, where, he probably wasn't in nearly as much danger, but he was a good cop, probably very qualified in his job. And I'm guessing there was probably a group of them that were also in that same situation. And they had put them in, the more dangerous parts so they potentially could die, so they could use them for this program. So it just happened to be Murphy who died first and survived long enough for them to use him. Because, that's one thing that I don't think they really get into is how much of him is actually still there in this movie. I don't know if they've actually explained that, like, his brain is still there even. Like, I know they say...
I don't think they did. You just kind of get the hints of it in that first shot where the video shows that he's seeing a flashback of what's his name standing over him.
But
Clarence.
Technically, couldn't they have copied his memory into Robocop's body? And that would have been an existential thing, that he actually wasn't Murphy. He was just a copy of Murphy.
Right. I kind of got the feeling that they were trying to say that humanity is stronger and the bonds that humanity forms is stronger than all the other junk.
Yeah, but now we're getting into if we create a digital copy of you, Bobby, is that digital copy you, or does it go on in persisting in the ones and zeros while you fade away into the distance?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting question.
I was so hoping you would give me an answer. Okay, how did you feel about the gunplay in the movie?
They all watched that Laser Bro movie.
Laser Bro.
It is Laser Man, and they were like, TJ Laser.
When we were watching, we obviously talked about modern movies like John Wick, where I feel like there's more integration of people who are more knowledgeable about combat and weapons training, who are actually there to train the actors in how to hold the weapons, how to fire the weapons, how to reload the weapons, how to walk with the weapons, how to turn corners, what, things that, if you're in the police and the military, you would know. And they probably hype it up to some extent. It's probably like, the reality plus 10%, right? For Hollywood. This obviously did not have that.
It did not feel that at all.
I mean, the action itself pre-Robocop was a little bit on the slow side, and it was almost like watching like really bad wrestling where everything's telegraphed.
So one of my notes was, should I take this movie seriously or should I take it like Austin? Like, was it that I was just like, am I embracing the campiness of some of this in a way that I'm just going to be like, I accept this, or am I going to be a little bit more critical about it?
I mean, the director has always been very outspoken on the glorification of violence in the first place. It's with this and Starship Troopers, it's always been a whereas you might see like a Tarantino who does kind of like a love letter to violence in movies. I always feel like Verhoeven was always a critic of it.
Yeah, it seems like Tarantino's more like wanting to like do what he's done before, like homage other movies. And this director is kind of like, I'm using it as a commentary for like how, like how media plays it up, and certainly like done for effect. Like in the boardroom when, like when the guy gets killed by Ed 209, like they all break out of their meeting and no one's affected by it at all. It's like they're trying to do
completely unaffected by it.
Yeah. And they see it as an opportunity to move up in their corporate structure. Like, oh good, he's dead now. Like, let's use this as an opportunity to pitch another project
to create Robocop.
Yeah.
How do we feel about certain bits? And I know there are probably, I'm going to call them comedic moments, but the one I'm going to point out, and this is before we get into Robocop, is making sure Lewis looked at the dick.
Oh God. Yeah.
They were waiting for that, like it's coming, waiting.
It was such a long beat. Just be like, really? You're going this far for this joke? Okay, let's do it, whatever.
Yeah.
So now I'll ask the question to follow up with Ed 209. You see Robocop. How did you like that design?
I really like the design. It's funny because like, I don't think I knew what Robocop was when I picked, because I literally picked this VHS up at a Blockbuster. You know how it used to be. You'd walk through the aisles and the VHS would be facing out, And I just remember it had that shot of Robocop stepping out of the cop car, looking at like out at you. And the way that it was lit and designed, like it just looked really cool. Because I'm a fan of mechs and robots, and like I am a, mech warrior, exo squad, like the whole shebang, like robots are like my thing. So seeing the design, like especially the way that he is painted, where it's silver but with a hint of like, it's almost like heat treated.
Yeah.
Kind of like
it's got this like luminescent look to it that I really like also.
I did like how, and I think I had mentioned it, how they showed him at first, like where you don't see him. So you see from his point of view, you see like a little glimpse of him on the TV screen as he's walking by. And then from then until he goes into the cage, it's all like side, like you'll see like frosted glass shots of him, shots of the back of him. And he looks huge. He looks very menacing. It's very, to the observers, like otherworldly in a way. But then I do kind of hate the fact that the next shot of him is just him inside the cage, sitting down, almost as if it was like a paparazzi following him type shot. I do kind of wish, I think I had said it too, like I wish that the next, when we actually really saw him was during when the two guys are attacking the woman and him stepping out of the car. That would have been an amazing hero shot for Robocop. But design wise, looks great.
They had that like gigantic Indiana Jones style like shadow of him behind there, looming
Absolutely.
over.
I do love the fact that the gun pops out of his leg though. That has always been really cool.
Yeah, that's really cool.
I think it's always been for me, the size, the look of that. And then me still to this day wondering about his weight and his agility. There's times where I think we saw him moving very much like a regular person in a costume. And other times I'm like, you look like you're really heavy. Which is it? Let alone him driving a car.
Yeah, I thought they did a pretty good job of, I mean, they must have had a bunch of costumes that do all sorts of different kinds of things, like a stunt costume and stuff. And I thought they did a pretty good job of melding them all together. Like we were talking about how like the cop bulletproof vest kind of looked a little bit pillowy to me.
Mhm.
Like they looked like padding and not like a Kevlar type of hard, rigid surface underneath it. But I thought that Robocop like looked really solid. Like he looked really good. And even when he was doing his stunts and stuff, and it must have been rubberized, it still looked the same to me. Like it still looked like it was mechanical.
I do want to come back to a very specific aspect that I know Matt thoroughly enjoyed. Robocop came with his own set of sounds, his own little sound bank. As he moved, it would be like, whoop, 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 whoop. And then yes, there was that part as well. And then in particular, he had a door effect of his own. When he opens doors, he chooses to make. I'm assuming. See, I'm making that sound come from him, Matt. That's the key. I'm making him. He's the one who's producing it. Because what else would it be?
I like.
I don't know. It just kind of threw me off. I mean, I guess it was a thing of the time or whatever to use those. It just reminded me of watching like Are You Afraid of the Dark as a kid. How they'd use random sound effects to like, it was like the idea that you would use sound effects to convey emotion or how you were supposed to respond. And I think that was kind of like a mentality during like the 60s, 70s. And I thought at this point in the 80s, it was kind of gone, but I'm guessing it was still kind of there. But like, I'll forgive the lion and pig sounds from Ed 209, but those sounds just kind of threw me for a loop because I just couldn't take RoboCop seriously whenever that happened.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't even know the source of like the Doom door sound, but like after playing Doom in the 90s and then hearing that Doom door appealing like so many TV shows, like it was from some general sound bank that everyone used. So I was thinking about that the entire time. But yes, he's just got, his own little sound pad that he's hitting. Maybe he's controlling it. He can make different door sounds when he wants. It's just the same one over and over, and he's enjoying all of it. How do we feel about all of our bad guys? We have a whole crew of bad guys, the ones that killed Murphy to start, but just ultimately that carry throughout the film with what was the dad? Oh yeah, That 70s Show. Kurtwood Smith as being our quintessential bad guy, working for the cops, being extra evil. How do we feel about that whole crew?
It's kind of a weird thing when you really think about it, because like I only know him from this and from the 70s Show. And I watched this before the 70s Show. So of course, whenever I saw him, it's the same reaction whenever I saw Walter White. And I was like, that's Malcolm in the Middle's dad. Like what the, it's a weird thing when you look at him, he's an older man, balding, wearing glasses, and he's the main villain of this movie. It doesn't really add up when you really think about it. But maybe that just ties into like Verhoeven's way of doing these kind of characters, because you do have like the corporate bad guys, and then you have him and his crew. Cause I mean, you have him, you have, was it Emil, the guy who goes through the toxic sludge later? You have the dude with the Back to the Future crony laugh or whatever.
Oh my gosh.
And then you have the, I don't know if he Asian or was he Hispanic? He just kind of vanished. I don't know what happened to him. He just kind of disappeared at some point.
Yeah,
I thought he got shot in the warehouse.
Did he? Probably.
He was the one they didn't use as much as some of the others.
And there was, what's his name? I know the actor's name. It's Ray Wise. He was part of the crew.
Leon Nash.
He was the nightclub dude.
And like, it's just such a weird crew. Like when you really think about like, okay, like go cast a gang or whatever, and they just got like the divorced dad squad for some reason.
Well, I think we also had that moment when the executives are talking, right? The younger one talking to the dick. He's like, "I'm young and you're old," and you were just like, "Wait a second, you're young." There's a lot of age stuff going on there. Wait, I know I had something. Oh, okay. This is the tech related one. Why is it in like futuristic films that interfaces with computers revolve around like a spike needle?
I don't know who started that, but it doesn't make any practical sense whatsoever. So I'll ignore Star Wars for now. knowing Verhoeven and the way his mind works, I'm pretty sure it was 100% meant to be sexual.
Oh, geez.
My
brain did not go there until you just said it. And now all I see is computer.
It's either that or he legit was working backwards from the death scene at the end with Clarence. It's one of those two things or both.
Yeah, that's another thing about this movie. There's a lot of good setup and payoff, and that's definitely one of them. That's for sure setup and payoff right there.
So, well, just spiky interfaces is the way to go. Why haven't we built that today? I want to see it today. Some kind of murderous USB device.
USB 5.
The other thing,
they do have like the whole like ridiculous system where there's like these little tiny holes and you have to push them with a freaking paper clip or something.
Oh gosh.
Have you guys had to deal with those kinds of technologies?
Like resetting a button on like your router?
Yeah.
Bobby's like, I want that to be a spike.
Junk.
I want a claw to do that.
Well, the other thing they did a lot of was a lot of first person view. We got a lot of view directly being the eyes of Murphy. And how did you feel about all that? Because I at some point I was like, they did this a lot.
Was it like, because at first I really noticed the CRT lines. Did it get less and less over time, or was that like my imagination?
I think it did. I don't think it was as prominent later on, but if you were to ask me about why we saw so much of it, I think it's because apparently wearing that suit was a nightmare. Moving around was a nightmare.
Oh,
and
thank you.
It's the total Jaws situation.
Or it could have literally just been because I remember that this movie had a really tight timeline from what I remember. I don't even think that Peter Weller was even cast until like when they started filming. So it was because he happened to fit in the suit that they had already made.
Sure.
So I know. So it's entirely possible that those shots might have been some of the first shots they did where they didn't have to worry about the actor, the suit, because I think the suit was also done like very last minute too. So it might have been more practical. I think at the beginning I think it really had a purpose, but later on, I feel like it might have been to fill those gaps. Cause we even noticed that sometimes the cameras kind of changed in quality. And I think that's probably because of either their filming schedule or second unit or something. So I think it's more practical than actual for storytelling sake, but who knows?
Is it weird for me to think that Robocop should have been more effective
at his job?
Yes.
What do you mean effective as in deterring crime or actually doing the... Because
probably doing the murdering.
I was gonna say, he seemed pretty good about murdering people.
I felt like, we get into the Coke warehouse, right? I'm like, he should have auto aim, but he always walks into a place and he lets them get off a lot of shots first before he's like, okay, I guess I'll shoot back now. There's always a good waiting period. And then he just killed everybody.
It did kind of make me think of, oh crap, what was that movie we watched a while back with Christian Bale with the gun kata? What was that movie? Equilibrium. Where there was that one scene where he was in the dark and it was really flashing strobing and he was just like,
yes.
I did kind of want that where literally he was just zipping around.
And he had some poses, right? Robocop had some poses.
I'm pretty sure he dabbed at one point.
It looked like that. It absolutely looked like that. We've, I guess, laid out everything. This is a story where he survives. He takes his helmet off. We have to talk about that. How did you feel about that setup?
It's such a trope in these kinds of movies, like Spider-Man. The recent Darth Vader stuff where they had to bust his helmet off and see his face. I mean, to me, in this movie, it kind of makes sense because they were trying to humanize him. And so they took off his mask and did that kind of stuff. But man, they always get rid of the masks for these masked characters. Every time, Spider-Man, Iron Man,
because it's in the contract,
Darth Vader.
Yeah, you got to have the FaceTime.
Yeah.
Well, the way that they write contracts, I wouldn't be shocked if had they not, they could have got screwed out of a lot of money or royalties or whatever. To me, the bigger thing, I guess, that stood out to me is I think it was really well done. I think that the blend between his actual face and the prosthetics was spot on.
Yeah, they did a really good job.
The neck thing did kind of bother me a little bit, but I get it. They're trying to make it look like it had a lot of components, but it still had to be flexible so you can move. but like the actual like the dividing line between like his face, and especially like if I think about like, you know, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, like they had kind of a similar thing going on with his face or whatever. Like this was really damn good as far as like the transition between human and robot. I was like, where's his ears at? How are they squeezing in there? Like he's probably dying on the inside as he's doing that, but
for sure.
I don't know. I think that I do wish that he had put the helmet back on for the final sequence.
I mean, the helmet look is so good.
Yeah.
This obviously leads into the end part where our bad guys get gigantic sniper rifles. There's lots of explosions. He gets metal thrown on him. And we're hinted at the idea that Lewis will become a Robocop because she was shot up.
Robocop 2 with like buddy cop Robocops. Did
that happen or no? Are we making that up right now? That didn't happen?
No. But I mean, I could see them going and getting like instead of like, you know, coffee and donuts to get like, you know, oil and some sort of machine base. I guess Gerber. It looks like Gerber's.
Was that a good end for their relationship for Lewis and Murphy?
Well, I mean, it's. I pointed out the fact that like I'm glad they didn't try to turn their relationship into a romantic one. They kept them strictly platonic. You know, they were partners, not for very long. Technically, they were partners for like one day,
right?
And then he died, and then they became partners when he became
they made poor decisions together.
They made a lot of poor decisions together. And then she gets shot, but you know she ends up surviving. So you know at least I don't know how she got shot like 4 or 5 times, but and then fell off a little mini cliff. But only Murphy doesn't make it, I guess.
And we're good with he got rid of the directive. He can't take out any of the executives unless they're fired. Then he just proceeds to lay into Dick, and we get I think what might be the screenshot on our YouTube video, Dick's arms, just as it's falling to the window. Yes,
that I know a lot of people kind of point that moment out a lot. It's just a weird choice because they went to stop motion for that as opposed to doing something like, you know, Die Hard, you know, where you actually had him falling against the green. Maybe it's just he was too old for it, or maybe I don't know, maybe they didn't even have that shot originally. Maybe they went back and did it afterwards, but that was a shot. And again, no one in the boardroom, like one dude was all super joyed because he just saw his promotion rising.
Oh my gosh. He was so happy.
Right.
He was so happy. I got to get that character's name. He was so
I'm
happy.
not going to join a board of executives ever because clearly they just don't care when you just get capped, I guess.
Oh, it was so amazing.
They just want you dead so they can get your position. I mean, I thought about that during this movie and I was thinking like, who likes their job? This kind of job this much that they're like willing to like fight in bathrooms and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, no, dude. Like, I'm not having any of this stuff.
Game of Thrones on the 96th floor.
Yeah, that's exactly what it was. It's 37 years later. We gotta ask Bobby, are you recommending RoboCop?
Man, I do really like this movie. I think it's really fun. It's not for the young kids, you know, but I really enjoy it a lot. I mean, I would recommend it. I mean, you know, if someone's looking for fun time where you don't have to pay too close of attention, you know, but you can enjoy it.
You say you can fall asleep during the movie?
Yeah, you might even doze off late if you watch it late at night at the end of it, you know, because you've seen it a bunch of times and you know what happens anyway, but you know, it's good.
Matt, are you recommending RoboCop?
Yeah, I think that if you haven't watched it, I think that it's an interesting snapshot of this time period and how they viewed the future. I think that it's an interesting commentary on the media and on violence in movies in general. It's a cool looking design for everything. It does have some pacing issues, I think, in the middle. Editing's a little bit weird at times. It definitely doesn't go really in depth on a lot of the characters. But I think that if you're looking for,
kind of like that part
I know it. I think a movie like this, I think this is one of those movies where I think that you can get away with it. Kind of like John Wick. John Wick has like a lot of lore, But a lot of the characters don't,
Mhm.
except for John Wick himself, a lot of them don't have a lot of depth beyond what this is their character. And it's the same thing here. You are this bad guy. You are this executive. You are this thing. And that's really all that character is. And I think that in a movie like this, that's okay because you're just kind of along for the ride. You're definitely not going to come out of this with some sort of like, philosophy, changing moment or anything like that. But at the very least, you're going to get to the very end and probably say that you enjoyed the experience.
Yeah, I think I'll agree with you both with my caveat of I'm writing that weird line of the camp that I felt was definitely there. Maybe even moments that could have harkened back to my love-hate relationship with Darkman. Did I say that out loud? There are just some pieces, with the gore that I was just like, maybe it would be different today, but maybe I need to watch the remake to see those kind of moments you talked about, Matt, where they delve a little bit deeper into stuff. But it is really that popcorn movie. It's the one you could throw on, hang out, you'll enjoy it. It's got action. It's very 80s, and there's no way around that. So yes, you should absolutely watch RoboCop. As always, thank you for listening. And really, I just want to know, can you fly, Bobby?